Today's conversation is about our food system and questioning, is it broken and is it servicing our needs as humans? Are we getting nutrition? Are we feeling connected to the land? It's a really pertinent, important conversation with Pete Russell. Pete is a friend. Pete is originally from Australia, lived in New Zealand and now lives in the UK and has started an incredible project called Ooooby.
Yeah, which is out of our own backyard. It's all about connecting farmers directly to consumers and cutting out all the middlemen. Yeah, we'll get into the reasons of why this is so pertinent and why it's so paramount at the moment, with which we, start to prioritize local food and build more local resilience, prioritizing,
And why this is important, because to many people, we often don't think of our food and the importance of that system and how it affects us as well as the greater world.
Yeah, Pete is he's not only just an entrepreneur that's been in the food business in terms of global food business before he started Ooooby, which he tells those stories beautifully. But Ooooby's purpose has been going for 20 years and it's amazing. It really, really is. It's about supporting...
We use it in our farm.
Yeah, it's about supporting local farmers in connecting them direct to the consumer. So it's a wonderful conversation about our food system and about what we can do. And it's very empowering as well as enlightening, we found it. So,
and if anyone is inspired and does want to connect to their local food system and lives within the Greystones area, we have an organic regenerative farm where it's all about growing the most nutritious food possible. We do have a few small places left on our veg box scheme. Check out our website to get some of the best veg you can possibly get.
And I think we might be expanding it to South Dublin as well. So it might not just be exclusive to Greystones. So there you go. Okay. So without further ado, here's the wonderful Pete Russell. We just finished our longest run ever there. A couple of weeks ago, we ran the Wicklow Way, which was 130 kilometers, which we did over 2 days. We ran the Wicklow Way and we did it in our Vivo Barefoot shoes, which people go, wow, you did it in barefoot shoes. And we did, and we had no pain in the soles of our feet at all. And what we found was incredible is that because of the minimal soles, we really felt connected to the landscape because there was so many different landscapes, hills and mountains and rugged terrains and over rivers and brooks and valleys, and just to interact and really, because you got the same amount of nerve endings in the soles of your feet. And we've exclusively been wearing Vivo Barefoot shoes for the last decade. As soon as we started wearing them, they really did change our paradigm for what a shoe should be. They have a natural wide toe box, which really encourages your feet to build strength. Studies from the University of Liverpool found that your foot strength improves by up to 60% within only a matter of months, which is absolutely incredible.
And I think one thing to note is that you wouldn't buy clothes that don't fit you or make you hunch over, just make you take on an unnatural shape. However, many of us buy footwear that forces our feet into these kind of tight, restricted positions where they're kind of just like a cast. They're locked in. By wearing Vivo Barefoot shoes, they've got a wide toe box, which allows you to spread and allow your feet to be in a natural shape and also to get feedback from the train. We couldn't recommend them more. Use the code HP20 to get 20% off at checkout. That's HP20 at checkout, vivobarefoot.com.
And my final thing is then that your feet are the foundation of your movement, that, it really all starts with your feet. If your feet are healthy and strong, that directly impacts your ankles, your knees, your hips, your spine. So we found them just to be fantastic for our body and for particularly as we get older, as all of us get older year by year. They're great.
Welcome aboard.
Great
to have you here,
Welcome home.
Thank you very much. It feels like home here, man.
It's great to have you here in person. It really is, especially it's been a good while since we've seen you.
Yeah.
And the first time, even just to tell a story to kick it off, the first time we met you, we were in Totnes in the UK and we were all traveling to an event up in Somerset, which was like a 3-hour drive.
What was the event, Dave?
It was a social incubator for food businesses.
Future of Food or something like that. Blossom
Incubator.
Be the Earth.
Be the Earth.
And we were looking for a lift up there. There was Steve and our brother Dara and myself.
Yeah.
And we were looking for a lift. And this fella Pete said, I'm driving that way. I'll pick you up. And he picked us up in a red car.
It was tiny.
And we had such a hoot. It was a 3-hour drive and we went by every regenerative organic farm on the way. And we just laughed and chatted, and it was rekindling with family from a long time ago.
It was from a distant memory. Yeah, it was incredible. We went to Schumacher.
Yeah,
Schumacher College.
Schumacher College, which is down in Totnes, this amazing centre for regenerative life, I would say, much more so.
Education centre.
Yeah.
Then we went to remember that
Singer guy's farm. What's his name?
It was a cool. Is it Almond Thief? It was a lovely bakery.
Oh, we went to the Almond Thief and the bakery there.
Grains, which was beautiful.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah,
really
and you
sweet
guys
trip.
were grabbing the recipe finding out how he did his bread. So that was good.
Yeah. Where they were using regenerative flour, different local flours and whatnot. Yeah, it was a very, very nice.
It was amazing experience.
Yeah. Well, today I'd love to tee this off by love to start with, let's talk about our food system and what are some of the issues with our food system, because you've worked in food for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, if you could just tee it.
And can I start with a broad brush statement? I was in the kitchen earlier and I was working with Raven and I was talking briefly about our food system. I was saying that in a way we live in a society that is very much focused on the aesthetic. It's often can lack a depth of character. And if we look at our food system, the food that we eat typically grown conventionally lacks deep roots.
Yeah.
It's often grown for appearance, for shelf life, for quantity. It's not grown for nutrition. It seems to be our society is becoming a direct reflection on the food we eat.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the way I think about the food system is take a really sort of long time frame sort of view on it. You know, if you go back past 80 years or so, before World War II, the food system all the way up until then, 10,000 years, was just completely decentralized. And everything.
Meaning that it was local, people kind of knew where their food was coming from. Right. Everyone was involved in their production of their own food.
Everyone was involved at every level. Everyone was very connected with how the food went from seed to a meal. And it was all very decentralized. It wasn't that you wouldn't be able to get food from different places around the world. It's just that there was full transparency and full capacity for you to be able to understand the journey from
if
seed
you were
to
eating
plate.
your bread, you knew who baked it, you knew who grew the grain, you knew who milled the grain. Like it was a full
thing, and it consumed the story of food consumed way more of a person's life proportionately than it does now. We lived to produce and consume food. That's what we did with most of our life, and so it was the main story of our lives. The main narrative was food.
Because if you look at most mammals, most of their day is spent in pursuit of food. You look at a cow, it must spend 8 hours a day eating. We're very different from a ruminant animal, but a lot of animals will spend a significant portion of their day in the pursuit of food.
Right. So it's like sleep. We spend a lot of time sleeping, and in a natural situation, we'd spend a lot of time just gathering and consuming food. Right. And then you've got your relations, and that's pretty much it. A bit of shelter, your relations, your sleep, your food. There's your needs met, right? And then when you think about, it's when we added economics to food, when we added the whole financial aspect of it, and where food became like the primary driver of production of food was more of an economic thing than just a survival thing. Then it started to become more sophisticated and started to become more of a service involvement, which is fine. But I think where the food system started to become less about the food and more about the money, or more about the economics, was around World War II. Around 80 years ago. When the industrial systems started to be able to centralize and concentrate the production into mass-produced models and long-haul distribution, and now what we're seeing is, after 10,000 years of a sustainable food system that could just go on and on, we've in just the last 80 years, very small period of time, we've diverged off that path so far that now, the production of food is carried out by like a very small percentage of our population relative to before, and the food is being produced primarily to sell, not to eat. Right. So when you're looking at how are we going to make this food? Okay, well, we got to have a taste profile, right? Because that's important to sell it. We got to have it so that it'll last a long supply chain. So we need to have packaging, we need to have preservatives, We need to have it looking interesting because, again, it's about selling it. But the actual nutrient, part of the food, that's what's been sacrificed in order to make a modern type of meals.
Style over substance in most cases.
In most cases. And so now we're eating a shadow of what we used to eat. So I think that, if you think about what is the primary driver behind the breaking of the food system in terms of its primary objective is to feed us and give us nutrition, I would say that it's come down to the priority of the profit over the nourishment, and then the hyper centralization and the hyper concentration of control, in way too few hands.
Yeah. Because even when you think about it, the base human needs, as you said, were for food, for shelter, and belonging. And this was what took up most of human existence up until 100 years ago, really. It was food, shelter, and then belonging was part of living in a pack and a tribe and whatever. And it's only been in the last 80 years that we've kind of outsourced shelter, which was a great source of satisfaction and meaning and purpose. Yeah. And then food also was a huge source of, it took up so much time and there was so much hardship. But there was that, when you were eating.
There was reward and satisfaction.
There was reward in that you knew you grew it. And there's almost like a different mentality when you're growing something for yourself or for your family or for your loved ones or for your community than when you're just growing it to sell it. Because when the mindset of when you're growing to sell it, you're kind of looking at how much does it cost, how much does the seed cost, what are the economics of it. When you're growing for your family, you don't want to waste it. You want to make the best of it. You want to grow this healthy. You want to grow this harmoniously. You're thinking of the longevity of the soil. You're thinking of all these various factors, or whether it's animal or vegetable or whatever it is, and you're thinking of it all. So there is a fundamental difference in terms of our food system and in terms of, as a society, the fact that we're 1 or 2 steps removed from food. I think, it's part of the reason why we're, there's a lot of people looking for purpose and meaning and whatnot.
And feeling disconnected.
Yeah,
and feeling lacking nourishment because the current food system isn't set up to deliver nutrients. It's set up to deliver calories. And calories and nutrients are very different. We started one of Ireland's first juice bars back in about 2005 and literally have been juicing for over 30 years. It's one of the quickest way to rebuild your immune system and literally get the essence of any fruit and veg. It's something I do regularly to ensure that my kids are getting more fruit and veg and more high nutrient dense foods.
Yeah, we've partnered with a company called Nama Juicers. They make incredible quality juicers. They've innovated the standard juicer. It's an upright masticating juicer with a hopper. That means that you can juice hands-free. So you simply load the fruit and veg up the top and you don't have to, you just step away and it juices itself. It makes super high quality juice where the pulp literally comes out dry and it's easy to clean. They come with a 15-year warranty. They're offering you 10% off with the code HAPPYPAIR10. That's simply go to namawell.com, use the code HAPPYPAIR10 for 10% off at the checkout.
Wonderful juicer, couldn't recommend them more.
Yeah, and I think food has become, it's become something that you do in between your pursuit of the next thing that's going to somewhat satisfy you.
The next pleasure almost.
The next pleasure, the next Netflix, the next something else. And people are like, I don't want to spend all my time preparing and in being involved in producing my food. I just want to be able to sit down, eat it, and then get on to the next thing in pursuit of something that is so ephemeral and never attainable. Because we've just been, I think, conditioned to wanting more and more out of life and moving further and further away from.
I wonder, is that part of it as a result of because our food is so low in nutrition, we want more and more because we know at a physiological level we're not getting enough nutrients, and that's why often many of us are consuming more calories than we need.
Yeah, it could be that.
Yeah,
it could
definitely.
be that.
And so maybe you can tell us about your experience before Ooooby. So tell us your experience with your in Australia before you
with your pastry business, wasn't it? How'd you get into that?
Yeah, so
you grew up in Australia, just for anyone.
I come from Australia, so I was born and bred in Sydney. And in fact, I grew up very much in a grassroots sort of lifestyle. My dad was in the army, so we moved around a lot. But my mum she was right into permaculture, and she was right into
permaculture. Wow,
she knew Bill Mollison. They used to write letters to each other in the 80s.
Wow. And Bill Mollison is the founder of permaculture.
Yeah, exactly.
Just for anyone who's
exactly.
He's the He's the OG.
One of the godfathers.
He's the OG.
Yeah.
He is the OG, and David Holmgren. So we grew up in that kind of lifestyle.
Like on
Just a
did your
few
mum
acres,
grow a bit of
about
stuff?
5 acres. Just had the
Wow.
chooks and the little sheep, and it wasn't like it wasn't a farm. It
Yeah.
was
A
more
little
of
veg patch was
little
the
veg patch, all of
Yeah.
that. But I grew into, came out of school, and I was just always entrepreneurial, and so I got into business, and I went
Entrepreneur, meaning you're always kind of
starting
On the hustle,
something
on the
and-
hustle.
on the
Wheeling,
hustle,
dealing, yeah.
on the hustle,
Making
all-
stuff happen.
always hustling. And after many different enterprises and ventures, I found myself in a food importing business where we were importing frozen pastries from Europe in freezer containers and shipping them across the planet down to Australia and selling them through all the supermarkets. So it was large scale industrial mass produced food selling through these, like soulless hundreds of supermarkets around the country, making great money. But there was nothing purposeful about it.
It just felt like buying from.
It was
Bill
just
to sell
widgets.
to-
It was just widgets, and we didn't care.
And that expression widgets is you weren't connected at all to the process. It could have been selling hammers or
Could have been anything.
screws or anything, but you were selling
Yeah,
sugar, fat, and flour.
exactly.
Processed, white, refined.
And that's what I
Into an end
realized is that it was the passion and the delight in the actual food was not there at all. And everyone we dealt with in doing business, the food had nothing to do with it. It wasn't about the food.
It
was
wasn't
just-
about where was the wheat grown. It wasn't what type of
Nah,
fat you were using.
only for marketing purposes.
Yeah.
All right, only for marketing purposes.
Telling
But
stories.
just telling stories, but it's just volume. You just had to pump volume. And so that's where I sort of got a taste for the mentality of our modern food system.
Mm.
Is it really is just about units, move units, and keep the cost down as low as possible, make it last as long as possible, make it survive the supply chain, and give it as much of the perception of food as possible. Like get that bliss point,
Make it feel like it's
Yeah.
fresh. Make it feel like
All
it's
of
an
that.
art, isn't it? Even though
Well,
and
a bit
just
like-
wrap it in, spin it in stories, and that we're just so shallow.
Stories. Well, it's a bit like in most supermarkets across the world. They'd say baked fresh in store. And it's like, yeah, you're heating up bread that was made at best across the other side of the country, but at least in a different country, sent there frozen and you've reheated. But that's called baked fresh in store. And people
And
think,
it's
oh my
also-
God, they baked their own
probably
bread.
did-
Exactly
and the
what
flour
happened.
probably came from another country, and it was preservatives and added to it, and colors added to it.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. That's
Yeah.
exactly how we did it. We had the baked fresh in store signs. We would take them into the supermarket and stick them up on the display.
Oh,
in
so you were
baked
literally
fresh
doing
in
that.
store, because they came in frozen and they were put into an oven in the store.
And baked, like it's funny how we tell that's the part of the, like we're all tricking one another, with this kind of thing. Because ultimately what you were saying is imported croissants from France, 3 months old.
Yeah.
We reheat them in store here and they're to you for 99 cents, and that's the full story. But baked fresh in store, the customer immediately implies that, geez, something, Peter over there must have made them himself and I'm buying
Yeah,
the croissant Peter made.
baked fresh in store, authentic continental.
Okay.
Right. So you it's an oxymoron, but you put them together because they sound good.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
It sounds sophisticated. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
they're from
You know,
France.
so it's the whole food system is it's more of a marketing and sales system of just moving units, not about the food. The story of the food is just the glitter, right? That's all it is. But the problem with it is that for me personally, I was like, wow, I'm putting all my life energy into this. I'm making good money out of it, but I hate it. I don't like it. I'm not enjoying it. I
You
was
didn't
even,
feel good about yourself, your
I
business.
didn't feel good about myself. I was driving here today coming from your cafe. It was such a great
Yeah.
lunch and seeing everyone. And I was driving over here and I was like, well, you either live to work or you work to live, right? It's like I live to work. Like, what would I do with my time if I wasn't doing something that was meaningful? I don't know what I'd do. And doing something that is meaningful is so much more fulfilling than doing something just because it's going to put some more money in your bank. And that's where I was with this business. It was lucrative. We did have the financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis, which if that hadn't happened, I don't think I probably would have woken up from the.
Because
You were just too comfortable.
I was just too comfortable. But when that crisis hit and the exchange rate spiked and our business effectively capsized just for a month or so, that was enough to sort of be a catalyst for what am I doing and why am I doing it? And then I started to think, what do I want to be doing? Like how would I want to be spending my time if I was working on something that was in line with my purpose? And that's when the Ooooby idea came about. And so it was about taking the lessons I'd learned from as a child and growing up, and the lessons I'd learned in business and seeing what I don't want and what sort of world I don't want to see for my kids. And then thinking, okay, well, what's the alternative? What's a different path? And there was in 2008, there was this resurgence of people going, oh, we've got to get back to our roots because this financial crisis is a real, it's telling us something. We've got to wake up. But of course, a couple of years went by and everyone went back to sleep. And so since then, we've just been working on this model of, and the aim is putting small scale food back at the heart of the food system. That's our purpose.
So that was the birth of that. Like Ooooby was based on the back of this, putting small local food system, putting that front and center,
and remembering, how food used to be when it really worked, and all the aspects of the social aspects of it, the nutritional aspects of it,
transparency,
connection to the land.
all of that, and just realizing all these things have been stripped away from our food system, and have made it hollow and made it like a shadow. But I think what's happened is we've been living through a period with the advent of like all the technology that we've seen in our lifetimes. We've been living through a period of such tremendous change at such a rapid rate that we've kind of reached an extreme of how far you can go before you start thinking there's something missing, right? Obviously in the space that I'm in, I get to have these conversations with people a lot, and so it might not be like that out in the world, but there are a lot of people really hungry for what used to be, the way things used to be, and the way their parents and grandparents used to experience things. And so what we're really working on is saying, okay, what do we need to bring back in order for the food that we eat to be something that's going to be fulfilling nutritionally, that's going to be bringing people and society back into the mix, going to be bringing authenticity and truth back into the mix.
Seasonality.
Yeah, and seasonality and all of those things. And what it comes down to, I think, ultimately is we need to find a way for small scale, independently produced food to be able to compete with the large scale, sort of centralized, mass produced food. And that is, we've got to make it convenient. We've got to make it affordable, right? And we've got to rekindle the story behind it, and for people to sort of remember this is what it's about. This is where the quality of life comes from.
One of the pillars of a good life, like food, good quality food.
Knowing where your food comes from,
and
having a connection to it. I think that's ultimately one of life's true joys, at least in my experience, my living experience.
And most people know that, right? Like everyone knows that.
But then good food is such a subjective term now, because good food is, could be Pringles and nice potato chips and ice cream and that can be good food to someone, and sure, that all tastes good, but I guess all our interpretation of good food is food that's nourishing and is connecting, and it's more than the sum of its parts. It makes you a more whole person than these isolated, processed, foods which make up most of what we're eating in developed nations.
You may not know, this year we're going to be 20 years in business. We started Happy Pear in 2004 with a dream of creating a happier, healthier world and building community. Literally, we wanted to start a food revolution. We're releasing our 7th book. This is our best book yet, I really believe. We're trying to condense our learnings from 20 years in business. We've taken 100 of our most popular recipes, refined them, perfect them. They're in this book. But ultimately, this book is filled with soul. It's about the journey. It's about the learnings, the lessons, the failures. It's really to inspire you to eat more veg, to live a more connected, happier, healthier life, and to really live a life that's rich in community. The book is called Happy Pear 20 because we're 20 years in business. It's available to pre-order now, and if you are listening to this past October 31st, it will be out, and you'll be able to order it from all good booksellers from around the world. And if they don't stock it, just ask them. They'll probably be able to get it in for you too. Thanks, Mel.
And a lot of the mass-produced food now is the cost of food now is less the actual food component and more the supply chain and marketing component. Like if you eat, an apple for one of just as a unit of food, and you pay, at €1 for it.
Yeah.
You're paying 20 cents for the apple, and you're paying 80 cents for the
logistics, the transport,
logistics and the marketing and all of that.
Wow.
So you're actually getting, you look at food inflation. I mean, that's something that's happening, really obvious now. The cost of the food itself isn't going up much at all. It's all of the services and all the add-on services that are being brought into it, and all the tickets being clipped along the way that are just increasing and increasing. And so if you're wanting to, we're at a stage now where, decent food is not accessible by a lot of people anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's people are now shopping and just buying more carbs and more higher processed foods because they've just got to get the calories.
Yeah.
But they got no nutrient value in them. And so it's actually way worse value for money, the food that's mass produced. You're not getting food, you're getting
food-like substances.
Food-like substances that are just wrapped in spin and wrapped in plastic and shipped extraordinary distances and double and triple handled. And that's what you're paying for. You're not paying for the food.
Yeah. And okay. So problem's very well established that modern food system is, it's working for the people that are profiting.
Feeding people. It's getting people
It's
calories.
feeding people. It's getting people calories, but it's
at the expense
definitely
of nutrition.
Relative to 80 years ago when the food system was very localized, it was very decentralized, and most people were involved in their own food system, their own food supply. It was transparent. You typically knew if you didn't make it, you knew someone else who made it, or you knew Pat the baker literally directly who made the bread.
Everyone had a garden.
Yeah.
Everyone had a garden. Everyone had a few chickens.
You ate in season.
You're right.
You didn't eat strawberries in December, at least in Ireland.
Right.
Or England.
Right. And you'd go to your local grocer to get the things that you wouldn't produce at home. Right? Your grains and your flours and things like that. But everyone was connected to their basic staples in their own backyards. It wasn't a burden, it's not a massive burden to have your garden and grow food. But it was just the way it was. And but that's slowly just been taken, that production and consumption that was attached to that has just over those 80 years has just been pulled more and more into sort of centralized industrial space.
And there's a touch of like nowadays, there was some statistic which I was listening to an agriculture podcast over the weekend, and the lady, she was some doctor of agronomy or something, but she was talking about that nowadays there's diet-related diseases, which makes up about 26% of all deaths. That diet is a huge contributing factor towards some of the biggest killers in the world nowadays. So like our food system is obviously it's getting calories into, but because it's so processed and there's so much food-like substances that we're eating, it's very correlated to obesity and type 2 diabetes and heart diseases, and so many different aspects of dis-ease are correlated to our food. And there is an aspect of where it feels like you know, the frog that's being boiled alive. It's not a nice analogy, but I wonder, to an extent, are we as a society, you know, it's happened, it's crept on us, it's slowly been creeping and creeping. And are we going to wait for this food system to break? Is that what's going to wake us up? Like, because it looked like during COVID, there was a slight awakening of, you know, there was a slight realization that, you know, within the likes of Ireland, there's only about 7 to 10 days food supply because so much of it's imported. I could be wrong with that now, but that was a stat that was being passed around. Where in most major cities, there's only about 7 to 10 days food supply within it. And if the supply routes are cut down, or if there's no supply, like, a lot of people will be, you know, stuck looking for food. So the idea was that during COVID, it might re-emerge and it might re-establish more local things. But what do you see? Because you've got to tell us about what Ooooby stands for.
Right.
That's the first place.
Well, so Ooooby, it's 4 O's.
4 O's and a BY.
So BY.
Yeah, so out of our own backyards.
Out of our own backyard.
Yes.
Ooooby.
That's what it stands for.
And is that an Aussie slogan?
Well,
or is that a Russell slogan?
It's a Russell
family
slogan.
Russell.
We used to be... So when we were growing up, my granny would say, we'd sit down for dinner and my granny would say, oh, the tomatoes are OOTG, out of the garden. And the eggs are OOTCB, out of the chook's bum. Right? And so Ooooby is kind of more generic, out of our own backyards, just in general.
So it was kind of correlated from your granny.
Oh, yeah, it was my granny. Yeah. So no, it comes from the family. My wife is the one who actually came up with the name. She, because I was going to call it Oog, out of our own gardens. And she was like, nah, stupid.
Oog.
Yeah, she don't call it Oog, call it Ooooby. Yeah, and it
Yeah,
rolls off the tongue.
Sounds nicer.
Yeah, I mean, in response, you know, your point is like, what's going to happen? You know, because you're right, it's been creeping and creeping and creeping, and we're getting the food that we're getting is just diminishing in nutritional value, in
there's
real
rise
flavor.
in allergies, there's rise in autoimmune diseases, there's rise in good health issues, mental health, and like, I'm not saying food is the only cause, but it's definitely
a major cause.
There's a high correlate. It's a contributing factor,
and it's not only food; it's our detachment from the land, our detachment from the natural rhythms, a detachment from the seasons, like there's a huge, bigger aspect, than just food.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's going to happen? Well, I think that.
Tell us your crystal ball. Have you got your crystal ball? Bring your crystal ball.
Let me tell you what's going to happen.
Okay.
Right?
And will you give us dates as well?
Yeah, I can give you dates. Yeah.
Cool. Brilliant.
When Saturn is in conjunction with I'm joking.
You know, I think the thing about humanity and society is that we work in cycles, right?
Yeah. History repeats itself.
Or history rhymes. And in a similar way, you know, we've got your pendulum swinging. You know, the likes of 2008 and you know, the whole COVID situation, they were catalysts to moving, you know, to moving the pendulum in the other direction. And a change is happening. Like it's accelerating. So one way of stating it is, you know, the small farm revolution. There are a lot of people who are moving from corporate jobs, you know, living in the cities and realizing I could go back to my hometown, or I could go into a rural community, and I could get 3 acres or even just an acre, and we can just start growing our own food. And we can start selling that food, and we can have that as part of an income. So we're getting access to good food. We're able to connect with our community. We're able to make a little bit of, you know, a bit of money on the side. And these people, they're, you know, at the moment, they're just on the edges. Right? But I think change happens from the edges, right? When it really starts to change is at the edges, and then it starts to creep in. And so we are going through a time now where the sort of the early adopters are pioneering the way, and there's a huge hunger for it. You know, I think there's a bigger demand for food that people can trust, and that they want, you know, the food that they really want to be eating, than there is supply. Right, the supply is still building up. There's way more demand for it than there is supply.
Nice, it's a good place to be in.
It's a great place to be in, but the thing is, you can't really measure it, because if you can't buy it, you just go to the next best thing, which is you buy something else. And so, but it is changing. It's already changing, and the thing that, yes,
How did you get started with Ooooby? How did you go from feeling like the financial crisis in 2008 and feeling like you'd run its course with the pastry business, and it was like, right, how do I go? Your wife came up with this title, not Oog, but Ooooby.
Yeah.
How did you go from there to establishing Ooooby to where it is today, which we'll get to. But if you can talk us through that process, because it's quite a journey, and you originally started it in New Zealand, and then brought it over to England.
Yeah. So we just moved to New Zealand from Australia, and that's when the 2008 crisis hit, the financial crisis. And that's when I started Ooooby from New Zealand. We'd only just arrived there. And at first we wanted to just find a way to make small scale local food accessible. And so we came up with a few ideas. We had a little shop on the island. We were living on Waiheke Island, which is a little island just in the Hauraki
So it wasn't
Gulf.
even New Zealand, it was off the coast of New Zealand.
Well, it was New Zealand, but yeah, it was in the Gulf. And we came up with like a local, like a shop on the island where people could bring their food from their gardens and sell it at this shop to the general community. But it didn't quite work. And so then we pivoted and we came up with a way of getting homegrown food into farmers markets. But then that was competing with the people who were trying to make a living growing food. And so then we were like, no, it's the actual small scale farmers that we want to support. So then we pivoted again and we came up with this way to be able to help the guys that you would find at the farmers market to be able to reach new customers by selling online. And this was 2010. So it was still early days in terms of online, e-commerce sort of.
Yeah, people weren't that mad about putting their credit card in the internet.
No,
back then,
yeah,
like
exactly. It was still
which is a crazy thought for lots of people nowadays with Apple Pay and Google Pay and all these different things. But there was a time when people didn't like putting their credit card in the internet.
Right. And that
would have been 2010.
Right. So that's how we got started. That's where we finally settled on this model of, if we can bring small scale food into the e-commerce world, into this new emerging marketplace, then that's the way that we can help to bring small scale back at the heart of the food system. Like, so one of the things we talk about is, this 80-year time period. It's called a saculum. Have you ever heard of a saculum?
No.
Right. So there's
Sounds
a Roman,
like a clever word.
Yeah, it's
I
very
like to
clever.
flash that word
Saculum.
around.
So a saculum is,
It's like
it's like a decade is 10 years and a century is 100 years. Another Roman word is a saculum, and that's about the length of a human life, so about 80 years.
Wow,
right?
saculum.
And a saculum is, the length of a human life is, again, what we were talking about before, the sort of the cycle that the society, revolves around. Because by the time you start a new saculum, everyone from the previous one has already died.
Yeah. So it's
Right.
your fresh legs. It's a bit like the way the human body every 7 years you've got a completely
But I think
new body.
is that part of, remember you once said it's that tough people make, so it's soft. Okay, hard people make
good times.
Good times make soft people make hard times make hard people, and then it goes around again.
It goes around again. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's another.
Well, we're
thing.
definitely in the good times make soft people phase.
I think
Unfortunately.
we're experiencing it. Yeah, we're experiencing that at the moment. So the idea of us bringing the small scale food back into the food system is about recognizing where we are in this saculum. And in our current saculum, at the end of the last saculum, we lived in a very decentralized food system. Everyone was growing their food at home. If you went to the grocery store, it was a local general store that was buying from the generally local region, and no one controlled the food system. It was just the ownership and control was distributed across the world in little small decentralized pockets, right? Then since World War II, it's become more and more and more centralized. And it was the centralized nature of it was basically controlled by the supermarket model, right? And all of the mass production of
which
food.
was the 1950s, the supermarkets.
Exactly. They started getting on into the sort of dominant position. And then we've gone through this period where the dominant shopping paradigm has been supermarkets. So you get in your car, you drive down, you park your car in the parking lot, you get in with your trolley and you just load up and
With
you
stuff
go
from
home.
all over the world that you don't
Yeah.
really know that much about other than the marketing slogans that are on the packet or in the store.
Right, exactly. Now what's happening is we're going back to a decentralized model.
We're
And
on
that's being
the
facilitated.
early stage of the curve, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's being facilitated by this emerging new market, which is the online market. So in some ways, the technology is actually facilitating a re-decentralization of the food system, because if you're a small scale producer, you don't need to have a massive building, you don't need to invest in all this heavy, large infrastructure to be able to try and compete with the supermarkets. You can just create a website and access customers directly via an online, platform, and you've got as much access to the market as someone who's got, the physical store. So the technology is facilitating the ability for small scale producers to reclaim that attention, the position where they can get attention from the customers and where they can sell direct to the customers. And so they don't have to go through these convoluted and controlled supply chains anymore. They can just bypass it. And it's happening on at an increasing rate. Where
And
people
so
are like,
Ooooby was really, it's came out of that.
Yeah.
It's ultimately, it's to solve that problem. It's connecting local growers direct to consumers via e-commerce.
right. And the customer experience is as good, if not better, than buying from the local supermarket on their phone, e-commerce. Like that's the thing. It's like everyone's moving to e-commerce, but the supermarkets are actually behind because they've got they've got to cover all of their overhead costs of their legacy infrastructure. Whereas the small farms and the artisan producers, they're far enough behind to be ahead.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
They don't have all this, incumbent costs, and they're able to effectively short circuit the system or bypass the system and deliver better food at better value, more convenience, and a more authentic, shopping experience, or a more authentic food in general.
Amazing.
And
so
even dig it-
Ooooby's been gone 16 years now. 16 years.
Yeah,
It's
right.
in your
Okay,
16th
since
year.
2000, in December it'll be 16 years. We just
Wow.
yeah,
So 15th year, just gone 15.
yeah, just gone 15.
And how was the
Wow.
big move from New Zealand to England?
Yeah, that was in 2019. Yeah, so after sort of 10 or so years of developing the system, where we were running and doing all of the
And how did it
extra-
evolve? So it evolved from, as you said, trying a little small local store. Then it evolved to farmers markets. Then it evolved to helping farmers find local
Direct to
customers,
customers.
direct to customers.
And then the last pivot
Iteration.
was in
E-commerce.
2019, where we stepped out altogether and we just provided software. So when we were doing, for 10 years, we were still buying the food from the farms and then packaging it into the boxes and then delivering it to the households.
Wow.
Now, we were doing it differently to the way a shop does it, in that we were selling the food before we bought it, right? So we were only buying from the farms what had already been sold.
Yeah.
So it was coming in, packed, and out on the same day. But then the final move we did in 2019 was to say, right, well, we're not even going to do that anymore. We're just going to step out and not be an intermediary at all, so that we just provide the digital infrastructure for farms and producers, food producers, to be able to just control their.
So leave them connect directly with the customer. So there's one less person in the food chain. One less
Exactly.
person taking money out. It was just a direct flow.
It was just a direct flow.
Yeah.
And that person, if you're a farm, that you might be able to sell your own food, but then you can also represent food from other producers in your region who don't want to deal with direct with households. They do want to just sell in bulk. Well, they'll sell to this farm,
And this farm will aggregate it.
and
or
they
break
can
it down.
become the farm can be the aggregator, as opposed to having another link in the chain.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So Ooooby, 2019, you started in UK, completely blank,
Yeah.
no small scale farms. You had software now to connect farms to customers.
Yeah.
And so it's been a case since 2019 of getting as many farms on board
Yeah.
that wanted to create direct to customer relationships. So where there's farm, like in the case of ourselves, like we use Ooooby and we use it to to sell our weekly veg box. Our weekly veg box is processed via Ooooby and it goes direct to customers. And where's it gone from starting in 2019 to where you are today?
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, in 2010 was when we opened our first hub, and we got to 3 hubs by 2019. So it took us 9 years.
A hub is a center where it's being packaged.
Yeah, where it's being packaged. So it took us 9 years to get 3 hubs.
Wow.
And then in the last 4 years, we're up. There's 100.
Wow, 100 hubs.
Yeah, and each hub is like independently owned. They're usually farm based. So yeah, it's growing very rapidly. And it's, there are businesses on there that have been doing this for a long time, and there are a lot of businesses that are actually starting up. Farms that have decided I could be selling this direct, and so they can just set up on the platform, have an online shop, and start bringing customers on, and then away it goes. And every week it just generates orders.
Like what it's really doing is, even a friend of ours, he was one of the first organic growers in Ireland, and he used to deal with the supermarkets, and regularly he'd tell stories of where I grew a full pallet of leeks was to go out to the supermarket.
A full field.
A full field of leek. They came down to have a look at it. It was half a centimeter too big. They rejected the full thing. He had a full pallet that's like a ton of leeks, suddenly going, what do I do with it? That's the full field. That's the full summer harvest. What do I do? Whereas D2C really empowers direct to customers, because he was selling it to one shop versus if you're selling direct to consumer, he would slowly sell those leeks over the course of a summer direct, probably partnering with another farmer so that it would into one of your hubs or the likes of that. So that it really empowers the small scale farmer to feel like, and it empowers the community because they're getting connected to the land, connected to the season, connect to the local story.
And when he was selling wholesale, he was getting 20 cents in the dollar. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas when he sells this way, he's getting $1 in the dollar.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, there's more work that he has to do, but he's getting paid for that. He's able to employ people to do that work, but he gets to control his own supply chain as opposed to just be a price taker. So yeah, there's a.
So Ooooby's really directly facilitating this decentralized model where people are getting connected more to the local farm, they're getting better supply food, and they know who's growing their food and where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So that's what Ooooby's facilitating.
That's exactly it.
And so if anyone's listening and goes, okay, do I go on Ooooby? Is Ooooby a marketplace, or is it more, does Ooooby facilitate?
There is a page. Farm? There is a page on the Ooooby. So if you go to ooooby.com, there's a page.
4 O's, BY.
4 O's, BY.com. There is a page where you can see all of the farms and food hubs that are running on the Ooooby platform, and you can find one that's in your local area, and then you can deal with them. But you'll be dealing with them direct.
Yeah.
So we're just providing the digital
the
infrastructure
and
right for them to run, but they'll be running under their own brand. Like the Happy Pear farm is on Ooooby. The customers are Happy Pear customers. They're not Ooooby customers. Right? They're your customers.
Ooooby just gets a cut a percentage.
We're just like a Shopify, but specifically for this type of business model.
Decentralized, kind of farm based.
Exactly. So if you're thinking, I want to be able to buy my food from one of these types of farms where I'm buying it direct, then you could go to the website and you could look it up and see if there's one in your area. Or the other thing you might be thinking is, I could get one of these farms up and running, or like a food hub up and running in my local community. So you might have a few acres, or you might know a farmer who's got a few acres, and you'd be thinking, okay, we could set up a market garden there, and we could start selling locally produced food from that market garden, and then we could start getting bread from the local bakery and milk from the local dairy, and and cheese and so forth. And you start to pull together a range of food from local producers in your local area, and be able to create an online shop effectively for all the food that's being produced directly within that region. And there's all different ways you can set it up, but that is what's happening out there now, as people are realizing, well, we can just short circuit the food system. We don't need to rely on supermarkets and on these sort of large chains. We can just set up a brand new startup.
Yeah,
in
'cause
that
It's
it's
now
super
level.
cool. Do you have any cool any stories of people you've been working with? Because people relate to people, and if you have any stories of people over the years that you've worked with, that is really, because it's what you're doing is the change that's needed to our food system. Our food system is not delivering nutrients. And it's not collecting people to the land, to the seas, and to their
Food, the
their
story.
food.
It's a
So
very
what you're doing
Yeah.
is giving, kind of almost re-empowering the individual again.
We've got tons of stories. I mean,
Like,
no,
gives us a few.
every single
obviously,
pub
yeah.
on the platform,
Or any
is a-
that
is a
springs to your
story.
mind straight away that you go, this was a great
Yeah,
story.
look, okay, Martin from
Yeah.
Moss Valley Market Garden in Sheffield. You know, he was a guy who was like, "Oh, I want to be producing my own food. I want to be growing food." He's very passionate about soil, passionate about growing, but of course, it's really hard to make money doing that. It's really hard, especially if you don't have a direct outlet. He got in there. He found an acre of land that he leased off someone, and he started growing his food. And then he started like a veg box off system where people could buy veg
weekly
boxes
veg
from-
box
a
with
weekly
it
veg box.
from
Started with
Martin.
10 customers, 20 customers, and away it went. But then what happened is the more customers you get and the more food you're growing, the more complex things get. And it started to become really overwhelming, all right, to try and keep all the moving parts working. And this is where we came into the picture. Is the software, what it does is it handles all of the very repetitive administrative sort of tasks that are involved. So it organizes all the information. Normally you would be spending, a lot of time dealing with customer inquiries, calculating.
I don't
the
want
orders
broccoli in
and-
my box this week.
I don't
Can
want broccoli
cancel
in my
it
box.
this
Can I
week?
have an exclusion and a replacement? You could be spending like 4 days a week just handling the admin side of it, which makes the model like not very viable.
Not worth it.
Not worth it. But when you take all of that repetitive kind of administrative work out of it and you reduce sort of 24 hours of work down to less than 4 hours of work, where it's largely automated, then that's when all of a sudden it's now a viable business. And so now he's able to deliver about 150 deliveries a week. He's got 6 employees, about 3.5 full-time equivalent, including himself.
Wow.
They're doing around about 150, and average basket's about 22 pounds, right? So it's like $3,000, close to $3,000 or 2.5, $3,000 a week in sales,
Very good.
right? And they're able to cover their costs. They're able to make a decent living, and they're doing what they love to do.
And they're feeling empowered.
They're feeling empowered, and they're completely in control. There's no one who's saying, "Oh, I'm not going to buy those leeks from you."
It might be one person, and that's fine. And
But that's fine, right? And so they're standing on their own 2 feet. They're completely independent in that regard. Then the one area where you could say, yeah, but they're at the effect of what about Ooooby, right? Because they're relying on us to provide this system. One of the things we've designed and we're in the process of implementing is like what's called a steward ownership model. You guys are familiar with steward ownership, right?
Yeah. It's a completely different business structure where instead of it being a limited company, it's steward owned. Maybe you can explain it. Sorry.
Yeah. So the idea being that what we're building is a way for people to become independent, selling food to their local communities, right? So they're not at the effect of supermarkets and things. But by doing that, we're building a software platform that they use as their way to market. Technically, if we didn't create a steward ownership model, we could exploit all the users on the platform. After, once we've got to a certain size, we could say, "Oh, we're going to put the prices up, or we're going to sell to Amazon, or whatever," and we could very quickly undo all the good we've created. So this steward ownership model basically means that the company has the articles of association are drawn up. So
the
that,
kind of legal binding documents that underpin the business.
Exactly. And what it means is that one thing that happens is it locks away. It says you can't sell the company. You can't sell or destroy the company, right? So
We're here to stay.
We're here to stay. There's no exit. If you want to invest in Ooooby, The only way you're going to get your return is by us being profitable and paying and buying your shares back off you.
Yeah.
Right. It also means that the imperative of the company is not tied just to increasing the value for the shareholders.
Yeah.
Right. It means that the purpose of the company is built into the Articles of Association, and so
And it
we
becomes
can make
a
decisions.
really mission-driven business.
Yeah, we can make
Like
decisions that might not be optimal for return on investment, but is optimal based on our impact, on our purpose, our principles.
Yeah.
And what we're building into Steward ownership is also a user stakeholder model in there, so that as a user of the platform, you might be a farm or a food hub, that as you're using the platform, you're actually gaining a stakeholdership in the platform. And so any of the benefits that accrue from that, like, profits that might come and so on, they can be redistributed through to the user base, right? And so there's a way for the users to be able to have a voice and a return on the platform that they're using.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it's an amazing one, because there's within the idea nowadays is that as there's more users get into Facebook becomes more valuable.
Right.
Because there's more and more people, there's more data, there's more information, there's more inertia within it. Whereas, and the idea with Ooooby as well is that as more users get on, Ooooby gets more valuable, and ultimately, if it becomes very financially profitable, it can give money back to the users. So it becomes much more democratic rather than all the value going to one person or purely shareholders.
That's it. If you could imagine Facebook where the profits were distributed among the user base, which would be appropriate. They're the ones creating the value.
Yeah. Or Instagram as well. Everyone's there putting their stories up and putting their accounts and putting more. We're only keeping it going ourselves. And ultimately, Instagram are the ones that, or whatever, the shareholders are the ones that get in the value.
I know it's something we've been exploring and kicking around. And
yeah, we've definitely looked at it, which is amazing.
Fascinating.
Yeah. But it really seems like Ooooby, and I can only give our own experience of the direct to customer, because we obviously have a food business and had a food business for 20 years and had a shop where you're selling a lot of imported stuff. And even back to the idea, there was a story which I thought about earlier when you were talking about that. It was back in maybe when you were back in your pastry business that you were very detached from it. And I remember ourselves back, it was probably 2007 or 8. We went to the World Organic Fair, which is in Nuremberg. It's called Barefoot. We went in 2007, and we were like these two bright-eyed puppies that this was our first business trip. We were going on a business trip
to Germany.
My God, wow, Steve, this is so exciting. And we went over there, and it was an incredible atmosphere. It was it was the World Organic Fair. There was so many people that were living to work. There were growers, there were food producers, and there was so many small scale, bright-eyed, excited people.
Delighted to go try my cacao nibs, try my blah.
In food, and they were extremely passionate. And then it was 2 years later, we were invited by another friend to go to, he kind of encouraged us to go to, it was called
Food Logistica.
Food Logistica, which is in Berlin, which is the non-organic version. It's this Food Logistica. It's based in Berlin. It's one of the world's biggest fruit and veg meetups. And we were so excited. We'd been to Barefoot, we'd been to the organic fair.
And we'd been going to the fruit and veg market in Ireland for years. And we used to call ourselves verdadeiros, which are vegetable men. We were vegetable men.
And we were so excited to go to Fruit Logistica. It was massive. It's the biggest one in the world. Oh my God. And we popped up there in our shorts and our t-shirts. Yeah, we're going to meet all these other vegetable enthusiasts. This is so exciting. And we went in there. It was just full of suits and ties. Yeah. And people were selling commodities. Do you want a container of this? It was a container. So it's a massive shipping container of this. You couldn't buy, it was just, the scale was so enormous that people were trading. Commodities. They were trading in commodities. It wasn't people that adored what they were doing. And it just felt so fundamentally different, where it was oh, geez, this is it. This is it. And that was the catalyst behind Dara, ultimately, our brother Dara starting our sprout farm and our organic vegetable farm. And, it's really that kind of inspired us on the journey to start our own local, more democratized system. And Ooooby, even just on the story of Ooooby, it was more that the direct to customer relationship with your own food. We grow the produce, and it was there a couple of months ago. We were calling around every Tuesday. We'd call door to door and literally call door to door and tell them about
calling door to door is something because it was say we have the farm and we managed to get enough money to buy the land and we started growing. We have an amazing team with Chris and Alessia there. And, you know, we were growing all this amazing produce and the farm was still losing money. And it was like, this is our baby. This is what we totally believe. So it was like, right, Dave, we're going to start calling door to door. People really like, we got to put our neck out there. And it was like, you know, when you got like, you're calling door to door,
you're like an encyclopedia salesman. There's
a certain amount of like swallowing your pride, a certain amount of like, right. But here we go. And then we did it. It was so worthwhile.
It was so worthwhile. But the bit which like, because you've got this direct relationship with a customer, and when you're calling door to door, which is as Stephen said, it's not an easy situation. You're telling them the value. You're telling them the farm's literally just at the top of this hill here. We're growing food. Come up on a Saturday. Like, come up on a Saturday. Bring your kids. It's amazing. There's often more kids there on a Saturday than grown-ups. And it connects you to your own food. Like, it's literally like when it's raining here, it's raining on our farm. Like, and you can see you're getting your food every Thursday, and we're here every Friday. We're delivering here, and we were opportunity. And it was just so interesting to make that direct connection between customer and farm.
It's black and white. It's chalk and cheese. I mean, and it all comes down to scale. The smaller scale, the more human it is. The larger scale, the more it's just commodities.
It becomes economies of scale.
And the whole attitude just switches 180 degrees. And the food is 180 degrees different. I mean, you're just smaller scale, human scale, local, regional. You're just going to get way more nutrition. You're going to get way better value for money. You're contributing to your local economy. It's a completely different experience. But in our minds, and because of the way we've been conditioned over the last few generations, we've been confused. We've been deluded into thinking when you go to the supermarket, they make it look like it's the real thing. They dress it up, try and make it look like the food that you would be buying, but it's not. It's diametrically opposed. Yeah. And that's what we got to wake up to, is like there is such a difference between this broccoli and that broccoli. They look like they're both just broccolis, but the difference is enormous in so many different ways. And I guess the point, the real point is that 80 years ago, that was normal, right? Up until recently, you couldn't get that anymore.
As in local food, local.
Yeah. You had to go to the farmer's market, and there was always, there were little niches where you could get it, but en masse, you couldn't get it anymore. Most people just had to go to the supermarket to get it. But now we're seeing a resurgence. Now we're seeing this idea of food that is grown locally and with love and, on a human scale is bubbling up again. And it's an option again. And it's an option where you don't have to put yourself out, where you got to get up at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning and schlep down to the farmer's market. It can be as convenient as you would go and buy something on Amazon, but you're buying it direct from someone.
And price. Many people go organic and local is more expensive.
But it's not.
It's not. Correct.
It's not. The three pillars: price, convenience, and awareness, right? To be able to capture market. Right? They're the three pillars to capture market. Supermarkets achieve those three things: by price, by economies of scale, right? Convenience by having everything in one place, and awareness by having this big shop in the middle of the town, that no one could miss, right? What we've got in the last just in the last 4 years, things have changed so dramatically in the food landscape because of price inflation, food inflation, and so forth. Buying direct from your local farms and food producers is now better value for money, typically. Like better prices, because you're not paying for all of the
packaging,
and all the handling and everything like that. So
and the upkeep of the shop and the shop staff.
Right, and all of that. You're not paying for that. So you're actually getting better prices when you buy direct. You're now getting better convenience because you can do it on your phone just like anywhere else. The only thing that's missing is awareness. People just don't realize it.
Mm.
So they think, oh, well, I'll go to Lidl or I'll go to Aldi or I'll go to one of these discount shops because that must be where the best prices are. It's like, actually, no. Now, the best prices is buy direct, but people don't know. All right? And that's why it's important for these conversations to happen is wake up. And
support by supporting your local grower. I think the money spent in your local economy comes back to you 10 times quicker than it does when it's spent to a foreign national company or to a big international conglomerate.
I mean, it's so much better
Something
on
like
so
that.
many levels, but people just need to realize it's happening. They just got to realize
The awareness piece is an interesting one, because that was like, obviously we've got a shop in the middle of town where we have flyers and there's posters about it, but people don't really see it. So that's what we realized. Well, we've just got to go door to door and start getting, this is a grassroots move, and we've got to make people aware that.
And you
got
to look people in the eye going, do you believe in your food? Do you actually?
Do you know where your food comes from? And it's an interesting one, because there's like so much of modern society, so many people are disenfranchised with, we're working to, or we're living to work, or we're working to live, whatever the negative aspect of that analogy was. There's we've little time, we're pressured, there's busy, it's demanding, it's all these type of things, and such an act of
independence or
rebellion, hope, meaning, and purpose is connecting to your local food. Like it really is, and I sound like a broken record here, but there's such a joy, and it's such a basic human. I don't know what the word
part
is.
Of life.
It's such
intricate part of it.
Yeah, such a fundamental aspect of life, our food and our connection to food. And as you said, for generations and thousands of years, we've known where our food has come from, and we've been involved in the production of it. And it's only now where so many of us are rudderless to a degree. Where we're looking for purpose, we're looking for meaning. We have a slight kind of emptiness within ourselves. Like food is almost like, it's like a life raft, or it's like a life buoy that someone throws at you that goes, hey, start with your food. When you start connecting with your local food, you're more likely to meet local people that are interested in the same things. If you've got kids, bring them to the local farm. You meet, like it's
so obvious that you don't see it.
Yeah, it's so obvious when you're this side of the fence, but when you're the other side, you just don't see it.
At the other spectrum, there's now nutrition drinks where you can, it's not even have a meal, you just drink this drink and there's your calories. And they have their place. However, it's a fundamentally different acquisition than purchasing something from a farm.
It's more like a car. It's more like a car that you pour in the fuel and the car goes on. It's kind of, there's an aspect of treating us more like machines rather than kind of, an
intricate part of nature.
Yeah, complicated organic system called a human.
And it brings you back as well. Like one of the things that I heard just the other day from a guy, Michael from the Compost Club, he was saying, when the whole pandemic hit, he was forced to stay at home and he started gardening, and that's how he got into it, growing his own food. And he said that he used to be a very shy and kind of reserved kind of guy, but the more he got into actually producing his own soil and producing his own food and so forth, he started to come out of his shell, and he didn't realize it, but over those 3 or 4 years, he's just become far more out there, expressive and so on. And you got to meet him. He's just such an expressive character. But he said, I used to be really reserved. And then he found out recently that when you get your hands in the soil, right, the microbiome that you're interacting with actually stimulates serotonin, right, which actually changes your biochemistry. So, on one level, we have detached ourselves so much from our lifeline, right, the process of producing food and consuming food.
And nature, ultimately
and nature and so on, that we now seek our serotonin and dopamine hits through all these artificial means. But if you just come back, right, and reconnect with and grow your own food, right? Like ideally, all the salad greens, no one should buy any salad greens. They should be able to grow all the salad greens at home, right? Why not? And they should be able to grow at least a portion of the food they eat should be able to grow themselves. And then the ones that are a little bit more tricky, okay, buy them in, but buy them close and buy nearby. But it's like that, those degrees of separation from how our food is produced. Over the years, we've just drifted further and further away from it, so that we're missing out on so much.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, final game. Let's play a game here. Okay, let's roll forward 5 years and roll forward 10 years. And let's look at the food landscape, because obviously we're in a moment and no one really knows what's looking forward. But let's play a game here and roll forward 5 years and roll forward 10 years. And what does the
Sure.
food system look like? Or what
Okay,
could it
5
look
years.
like?
What do you think, Pete?
5
So
years.
2030, just imagine, let's say 2030 and 2035, because they're both.
2030 and 2035. All right. Well, let's go with 2035 first.
Oh, great.
Oh,
Um,
what is it? Most people overestimate what they'll achieve in a year and underestimate what they'll achieve
Grossly
in
underestimate
5
what
to
they'll
10
achieve
years.
in 10
right,
years.
exactly.
Yeah.
So if we say 2035, well, the starting point is there's already 500 million small scale farmers on the planet. 500 million small scale farmers on the planet.
And most of them probably in more agrarian societies.
And
so
in,
probably
most of those are in developing
India and
countries.
Africa.
But there is already that many of them. They currently are being exploited, right? By
Grown for supermarkets up in the Northern Hemisphere,
exactly.
for example.
Yeah,
or
they're just growing one crop, which they're
or
selling to a
coffee or
trader and so
chocolate,
forth.
which is, yeah.
But the fact is, there's that many of them out there. So firstly, you think, okay, how many of those can start to actually become independent and remove themselves from, the exploitative relationship that they've got with trading by being able to sell more directly? I mean,
so they've got to become more diverse as well. They've got to move
become
from
more
monocrops
diverse and so
to
forth. But there's a baseline
Of half a
of
billion
hundreds of millions of these small scale farmers who can start to move in this direction. And then you add to that all of the land that is out there at the moment that has just, been used for commodity crops and so forth, where the farmers are looking for market gardeners to come in and take a corner of land and, and create a business there. I think that in 10 years' time, what we can see is that there's going to be there are going to be hundreds of millions of people who realize that by producing their own food and producing food for their local region is a really sensible way to get a work-life balance or to get a balanced life. It doesn't need to be a full-time thing. Like a lot of them is a concept in Japan called half farmers, right? Where half of the time they're in the office and half of the time they're out in their little farm, right? And so I think there's going to be
Sounds like a good balance.
A huge resurgence of people who are like, okay.
Sounds like it's very good for your mental health, that does. That
Very good
sounds
for your mental
really good.
Right?
Okay, so what do you think? Landing the 10 years, what do you see in 10 years? Gives a more concrete
Well, I'd
example.
say, I mean,
Are we still going to supermarkets? Are still 95% of us going to supermarkets for all our needs?
I think that we'll be going to supermarkets less often,
Yeah.
right? Because of our fresh food we'll be buying more directly. And so instead of going to the supermarket every week, you'll be going, say, once a month, right? And that smaller scale artisan producers of breads and cheeses and things, that's going to see a resurgence because there's new channels to market for it. Right? There's already there's 100 hubs around the UK running on our platform, and feeding into those 100 hubs is about 600-700 farms and another few hundred artisan producers. So you're looking at over 1,000 suppliers sort of supplying into this thing. There's 35 there's about 15,000 households currently just getting their food through this network.
True Ooooby.
Through Ooooby.
Wow.
Amazing, 15,000 is a lot.
And if we continue along the trajectory we're going, in 5 years, we should be somewhere in the order of around about 1,500 hubs. Right?
Wow.
That's if we just carry on the trajectory we're going. If we don't see, I believe we're going to see an acceleration because people.
So let's assume there's 30,000 hubs.
inflection
How many
point.
people? How many
An
people
inflection.
would you be served? How many people does each hub serve typically?
Well,
Just to see
typically around about 100 to 150.
Okay, great.
Right.
So you're pushing 1 million.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, but see, once it gets to that inflection point, once you've realized that, hang on a minute, that's
Right.
just a better way to get my
Or
food.
500,000, yeah.
Right? That's when it hits the tipping point. And I do believe that the supermarket model is not going to be able to keep up in terms of price, convenience,
Packaging.
and just better value.
Packaging, global warming, all
All
the
of that.
kind of. All
Okay,
the,
Dave, gives your 10 years.
Well, I'd love to think like I'm an absolute dreamer and an idealist, so I'd kind of say that it's exactly as you're saying. It's much more local, it's much more reasonable, but maybe, and I don't know, maybe there has to be, we've to get another wake up call. Like it tends to happen in our society nowadays that we're so busy with
A shock
just
is typically-
surviving that maybe we need another wake up call will happen within the next decade, which might fast track these things and fast track local resilience, because ultimately, aside from economics drives everything. And we're also this idea that money, fame, owning stuff like that's what your purpose is, what your real purpose is. But ultimately, if the, shit hits the wall or shit hits the fans or whatever.
Shit hits the wall. That's a nice one.
I don't know what that analogy is, but when
you were close.
When things go belly up, like food is we can eat food. You can't eat money. You can't eat fancy cars.
You can't eat a block of gold.
You can't eat solar panels.
Bitcoin.
You can't eat Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
So like for resilience in a very changing time and a turbulent world that has much less slack in all our systems, whether food systems or water systems, all these type of things, like understanding about food and being connected to food is a sensible thing to do.
So give me your 10-year, land it.
It's way too broad. No,
I think 5 years is going to be a bit even more dystopian, and I'm a total optimist. I just think there's going to be more further down our TikTok generation, our pursuit of pleasure, but it'll reach a point where it's an inflection point where it'll push back more and more. Thus, that in 10 years, I believe people will be connected to the land. People will be much more like, I even see it nowadays in social media, and maybe it's the own echo chamber that I'm in. I see more and more people talking about being time millionaires and more people pursuing freedom as opposed to pursuing wealth.
Yeah. Time million. There was a great movie I watched there on that. It was called In Time. It was Justin Timberlake. I think it was maybe 10 years old, but it was, instead of money, people had time on their wrist. It was a time. Did you see that one?
I've seen that one.
It was a time tattoo, and you literally became time millionaires where you had like 100 years, and most people only had a day. So ultimately they were really, really living. Whereas the really wealthy people had like a century and they had 1,000 years, but they were so afraid of dying. So the only people that were living were the poor people who were living day to day. And it was a really great analogy about time and time being our most relevant resource, and using that on a daily basis rather than monetary.
That speaks to the survival instinct, right? Like, I think that one of the things that is going to drive this whole movement, and that is already driving this movement, is when your survival is being threatened because things are going off course so much, and you realize, even though it's a drifting, it's like boiling the frog, right? Even though it's incremental, there's a thermostat in you that tells you when exactly, and that's when your survival instinct kicks in, and that's when everything changes around what your priorities are, right? And when your survival instinct kicks in, we are hardwired. We cannot deny it. We are hardwired to say, I need to know where my food's coming from. All right, when shit's that uncertain, you have to know, where am I going to get my food?
How am I going to feed my family?
How am I going to feed my family? And my trust in the system is diminishing to a degree where it goes past that threshold where you're like, I don't trust this system anymore.
Well, the system's not designed to feed you. The system is designed to make money.
Right. And so there's a threshold. And I think what's happening is there are a lot of people who are already crossed that threshold, who are already spending right now, are doing the maths and going, right, I've got this many acres of land. I can do a crop plan like this. This is going to produce that. This is our economics. Yeah, we can feed our baby, and we got this, and this is how we're going to cover this. And they're thinking this way because they've crossed the threshold. And I think that what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years is we're going to see a massive amount of people crossing that threshold where all of a sudden, boom, I need food security. I need to know where my food's coming from. I've either got to produce food, or I've got to connect in with who is producing my food, or I've got to get involved somehow in making sure that I've got my food sorted. Because it's obvious. You just look at what's happened to our food system over the last 30 years, like just our lifetime. It's just got more and more hollow, less and less trustworthy, more and more illness. And it's just way less dependable.
Yeah.
And there's a point where I'm not going to put up with it anymore, because actually there's an alternative that's way better. And it's achievable. It's within reach.
So the big message for anyone listening here is that, if you are feeling disenfranchised with your food system, if you are feeling that
disconnected, a little lost, possibly in some aspect
like
of your
a
life.
slight emptiness, like the opportunity within connecting to your local food is there. It's much more realizable than most people think. Ooooby is a platform that connects local farmers direct to customers. If you're looking for a place to start, check on Ooooby. Have a look at what farms might be near you. If you're based in Greystones, the Happy Pear Farm can deliver directly to you. Come visit Saturday morning. A lot of people come up between 11 and 1. They come up with their families, they come up with their kids. As I said, there's often more kids than there is adults there. Yeah. But ultimately, it's about, like, the main message, which I'm getting here today, Pete, is about that the opportunity within food to reconnect with ourselves, with our own human nature and with nature and our food supply is really prevalent. It's such an opportunity to feel more, feel more. And the current food system is not working for most people. It's designed for profit for the select few. It's not designed so that you have a steady supply of the best quality food for you and your family. But the opportunity is there. You've just got to look slightly differently.
It's already happening.
Yeah,
it's already happening. So you can just get involved. You can either get involved by buying food from a local farm or food hub in your region, starting a local farm or food hub in your region. Just get involved with one. Like, there are so many ways you can get involved, and it's massive. It's a small, what we're calling the small farm revolution. It's really shifting. It's really starting to happen.
Yeah, well, you talked about the inflection point. We passed that inflection point a few years ago, and that's why we've our farm, and where, like, there's more and more curiosity and more desire to really understand it and
how to grow the most nutritious food possible. We're at 5 a.m. today picking soil samples from different ecosystems. Yeah, which is pretty cool. But that's
anyway, we're gone way off topic.
Pete, you're wonderful. Thank you for coming.
A legend. So if anyone wants to learn more about Ooooby, ooooby.com. And as Pete says,
how do you spell Ooooby?
4 O's and a BY.
Boom. Thank you, Pete. You're the man.
Thank you very much.
Woo! We love that you're listening to our podcast. Thank you so much. We really like to think of ourselves as plant-based cooking pioneers.
What you may not know is that we have our own recipe club, which contains hundreds of recipes designed by us. And for just $3.99 a month, you can be part of our recipe club.
Not just that, but you'll be part of our community, which means you can chat with us in the chat with other members and take part in our live events.
And ultimately, by supporting our recipe club and us, we can continue to get better guests and improve this podcast more and more.